Usually, any approach to diversity, especially in advertising, it always silos people's identities. So I think nuance is so important. I think it's really important that we understand that as individuals, we are all intersectional. All of the different characteristics that we have compound and intersect in very different ways, which means that we experience life differently. So for example, I'm a South Asian woman who experiences disability.
What I'd urge people to do is really focus on an individual, build a character, build a story for that person, and then think about the nuances that make their life and why that's relevant to your ad. And think about all the things that live around that person. All the things that would shape that individual will help build a much richer picture.
Make that connection so you can understand and hear what those communities are already doing and have been doing for years, but that actually resonate with entire audiences. So for example, we work with a company called DAVIES, and for years I think the whole of the sort of yogurt category has sold it as breakfast and always got fruit on it. Actually, we've delved into these communities, we've discovered that the South Asian community are having yogurt 3, 4, 5 times a day with every meal. When we order a curry, yogurt comes with it. But that assumption hasn't been made by a brand. So just showing yogurt in a different space, even if it's, you can have a sweet one and you can have a savoury one, because small understandings about communities' ways of being that they've done for years can actually make a big difference to our growth of our sales, and also to doing something new and exciting with a product.
The Midnight Ramadan League campaign, which was created by Adam and Eve DDB, was a campaign that came out in Ramadan which showed some Muslim men and South Asian men playing football at midnight in the month that they were fasting. And what was incredible about it is that it used a range of different insight to tell that story. So one of the things was that Asians in particular in the UK are hugely underrepresented within football and sports, and so it was leaning on that to tell that story. It also had the subtle story of showing a lived experience of this person and their Ramadan. For me, it just felt like a very normal day in this person's life. However, the story had a lot of impact in what it was trying to get across and how it was portrayed. There was a wider theme of sport here, there was a wider theme of who this person was, and I think often advertising really stops us from seeing a person beyond the box that they tick. And so I think the best stories are those that they almost happen to be that person, but that's not the storyline that they're bringing to the advert.
The Virgin Media ad, where you see a gamer who happens to be disabled, what it's really about is a love story, and the male character happens to be a disabled character. So I think just seeing people portrayed in everyday life in a real way really matters.
Depicting people as people. They're not being depicted because they are disabled.
I want to see disabled mothers. I want to see the nuance of disability intersecting with race.
So if we understand the richness of their characters and see them as multidimensional, not the stereotype that you're trying to talk about, then we start to tell much more interesting and engaging stories that people will pay attention to. And so we have a greater opportunity to influence as a consequence.
The off-screen element in authentic portrayal is extremely important because the nuances are there.
We no longer say we design for a consumer, we design with a consumer. Make sure you have the people working with you that you want to represent.
Diversity is pretty meaningless if it's only on screen, and then we're still seeing the same closed groups of people holding power and making all the decisions.
Look around a big boardroom table, they're often white males, and I've often been the only female.
97% of CEOs in the UK are from Caucasian white backgrounds. It needs to start there. I really want to see better representation at the top.
More diverse leaders tend to have more diverse teams and eventually create more diverse leaders. So it's really important to diversify your teams and go out and spend the time and the energy finding that talent that if they're not ready now, that you can support and give them the necessaries to ensure that in a couple of months' time or a couple of years' time, they can make those decisions.
You cannot portray a character or an event or a person authentically if you don't have the experience. And we know experience is currency.
You can't think on behalf of minoritist communities. You have no idea. Like, I couldn't think on behalf of disabled people. I don't know what that experience is like. I work with and partner with experts from disabled communities when we're doing work around anti-ableism, and it needs to be partnership. And that behind the camera is even more important than representation on screen, because it makes your representation on screen more meaningful and more authentic.
You look around on the tube, that's really your audience, not the people sitting around that table.
We have a saying, by us and for us. So actually it's about how you're collaborating with together to create that work where people feel seen, they feel represented, but they also feel celebrated. And then they'll continue to show up and want to be part of the future work that you create.
I think what matters most is really understanding them and engaging with them early in the creative development process. So doing that check-in with them to make sure that the way you're portraying them is really authentic. There's lots of different ways you can do that through research, but really understanding that audience at the early seeds of an idea, and not once you get to the execution, is what I would really guide people to do.
You can spot advertising specifically where they've decided to plonk in a person from a minoritized community at the last minute. You can see where they've decided to shift the casting, and nothing else about that advertising changes.
But if they did that in the very beginning, say, look, you know what, I don't know, can you help me? Just say you don't know, because if you make an assumption, that is when you always get inauthenticity and tokenism.
As a short-term measure, hopefully, whilst we get our houses in order as an industry, I think research techniques like focus groups and surveys, I think can help to get us to the other side, and they can help to make sure those voices are factored in when advertising design is happening.
Data tells a story. Data can help you drive good decision-making. The evidence is here. The Black Power report has uncovered that the multicultural communities, that's Black, Asian and multi-ethnic communities, disposable income is 4.5 billion. Sometimes diversity can be like that four-letter word, risk, but it's important. Every business takes a risk, and this is an audience worth taking a risk on.
Women and Heritage is a research study that the Unstereotype Alliance commissioned, undertaken by a group of partners that is intended to investigate and understand the lived experiences of minority ethnic heritage women in the UK today. And to my mind, having done quite a lot of desk research on the topic, there's not very much research like it. So our survey sample of ethnically diverse women in the UK actually voted brands and companies as the body with the biggest power for change. And that was over, for example, politicians, it was over the police. And so the fact is that brands are in a uniquely powerful position to make a difference.
Working with nuances across different markets is especially tricky. We work with brilliant trans creation agencies, we work with people in country to understand the nuances that they appreciate about their brand better than anyone else. A lot of it comes down to trust. You know, if we don't have all the facts, we're trusting people in market to give us advice. I think translations on their own can be tricky. So we're working with a brand right now where our French translation was deemed completely different in terms of tone than the UK translation in English. And we had to work really hard with local copywriters and people in the market to just go, this is the feeling that we're trying to get across. How do you create that feeling rather than translating something verbatim? And I think speaking about the essence or the outtake that you want to create from a piece of advertising is much more effective than just saying translate this script.
Anybody is in a position to make a change. I think often people fall into the trap of thinking that you've got to be the chief strategy officer of something or the CMO or the CEO of something, but truly, people at any level of seniority, of experience, and any different specialism within an agency can make a difference by showing an interest, by swatting up on things. When you do that, you connect with other like-minded people. And that's what I love about the Alliance. And that community is so important because it self-fulfills. When you're with those people who have got that shared intention of doing things like tackling sexism, racism, then that's really exciting because I think it has the power to make a big change.
I think it's really important we acknowledge we can't fix the past. We have a massive opportunity for the future, creating a more equitable kind of society and working environment.